Hello, welcome to the chat room. Nice to have your company. The fastest 28 minutes on television, and filling this 28 minutes with ideas and facts and things for us to think about. The Dean of Sydney, Philip Jensen.
Hello, Kel. Great to be here.
And I bet you're going to be interested in today's topic. In fact, I'd put money on it because I'm an Aussie, and the legend is that Aussies will bet on anything. Betting is a problem. Gambling is a problem, isn't it?
Big one for Australians anyway. It's a huge problem.
How big is the problem?
There was a government industry commission report a few years ago which talked about vastly growing figures. So these figures will be out of date now. But at that time, around the turn of the century, we were talking of every Australian adult spending $1,000 a year on gambling.
And that's an averaged figure.
Yeah.
Because I didn't spend my $1,000.
I didn't spend my $1,000, so somebody's been doing it for us.
Yeah. So the figures actually end up saying that some people are spending vast amount of money.
It's much worse. That is, 80% of the community gambles, 40% gamble weekly, 20% of the community is still a lot of people.
Yes.
20% of the people really gamble very heavily and are problem gamblers. And they're losing roughly $12,000 a year.
So you need to imagine an Australian household with just $12,000 flowing out of it.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's the poorer people who are targeted in gambling.
You mean that the targets for the people operating gambling? It's the poorer people who feel lured to gambling.
Oh yes, and purposely targeted. So you'll find more poker machines, you'll find more buses going from casinos out to the poorer suburbs to take people in.
That's not the image the gambling industry presents.
Oh,
the
no.
gambling industry tells us it's responsible, and it wants to. It doesn't want to hurt the families. It doesn't want to hurt problem gamblers.
One of the big clubs in the poorer part of Sydney, it was an ethnic club particularly, but it doesn't matter which one. They found the big accounting firm, KPMG, did a survey from them, found that 5% of the members provided 85% of the revenue.
So there were some people just compulsively?
Oh, there are some people who are compulsive and
pouring money in.
Addicted or compulsive problem gamblers are a particular percentage of the population. People in the 18 to 25 age group get addicted. That's the age at which people tend to get addicted, and so it's a really serious problem because up till 25, the brain development of being able to work out consequences and risks hasn't really happened properly. And so in that period of time, people who don't understand risks well start gambling because they're over 18, they're allowed
Well, they
to.
drive cars the way they do.
They do. It's also why we put them into armies, to jump out of trenches and run towards the enemy. They don't understand risk. And the insurance companies know that. That's why the under 25s have a different insurance rate than the post 25s. Well, that's a particularly at-risk group of people.
For getting addicted, becoming addicted.
For becoming addicted. And problem gamblers, it's just dreadful. It is absolutely dreadful, the consequences of what they go through. It's worse than being an alcoholic.
Okay.
And an alcoholic actually reaches the place where they fall down stone drunk and can't do any more damage, whereas the problem gambler, there is no bottom line. You just keep going.
And the circle of people around you who go on being hurt.
The families, it destroys their family income.
Before we get to that, can I just raise this question of it being a problem? Because some people watching us now, or some people in the wider community will say, well, okay, there's a little group in the community who've got a problem. But
20%.
Gambling's not a problem for the community. Why should the community... Gambling, basically, we all have a little flutter occasionally, and the gambling industry says, everyone, it's just fun. Explain to us why it's a problem for the community.
Okay, well, firstly, 20% of a community is a big part of the community. 1 in 5, and remember, each of them is living with a family, or used to live with a family until gambling destroyed their family. So it actually affects directly a large percentage of the population. But then it corrupts our society. Gambling has always been the place where people launder money, where the corrupt elements of our society, whatever kind of mafia that you have, it will come in and through gambling. Furthermore, it corrupts government and media so that they are rich enough to be able to bribe and corrupt media announcers about gambling and won't allow the gambling discussion to take place. Politicians own poker machines and so then don't allow the issue to be discussed. And the government itself is corrupted. It's been estimated that the Victorian government, 15% of the income comes from gambling.
And that undermines what a government's prepared to do about gambling.
Can't stop gambling, can
Yes.
it? 15% of its income.
A lot of Australians don't want to see that. A lot of Australians still want to see it as being a joke. You know, part of the national character. Oh, mate, you know, two Aussies that bet on a couple of flies crawling up the wall.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's just part of the national character. It's just a joke. Somehow we need to get beyond that, don't we?
Oh, we do. That's one of the bad features of our culture, is to be able to rationalise and to joke, and in the process put down people who want to raise real serious moral issues about it.
Yeah.
It's a wicked system, gambling. It's like a voluntary taxation, except those who are addicted, it's not too voluntary, and it's an unfair taxation. You couldn't have a taxation system that the government, that the community would ever vote for, that allows 5% to pay for 85%.
Yes. So it's a gross rip-off as a taxation
It's a terrible
system.
taxation
Yes.
system.
Yeah.
Now, as a non-gambler, suits me. You know, but then that also is the problem. It doesn't, as a community, we don't care for people.
We're prepared to accept the benefits that are paid for by a small bunch of people who've lost huge amounts of money.
Yes, but it's really unfair that some people should be so penalised.
Is there any picture of how we compare to the rest of the world? I mean, we do have this legend that Australians are gamblers, will bet on anything. Is it true? Is there any evidence that we are worse in this area than others?
Well, that government report did say that Australia has some of the highest gambling in the world. We more so than Europe, more so than North America. And always amused by the fact that when people want to reform our society to more relaxed views on anything, they always say, well, you know, we don't want to be an isolated, old-fashioned, different from Europe and trends elsewhere. In gambling, we're way ahead. 1% of the population lives in Australia.
Of the world's population?
Of the world.
Yeah.
21% of the poker machines are in Australia.
1% of the people, 21% of the poker machines. That is, I mean, that's a breathtaking number, isn't
Yeah.
it? That's amazing.
We have the highest rate of poker machines in the world. We have one for every 60 people.
So if gambling is a problem, this is the place it's going to be a big problem.
It is a big problem, yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about why it is a problem. And it's a problem because it hurts families, isn't it?
Yeah, it destroys people's lives. It really brings them into terrible misery, personally. But it's a problem too. You see, you asked earlier about going into the community. So many crimes have been created because people have got themselves into difficulty in gambling.
Had to get out.
Had to get out, so they've corrupted the banks. They've stolen from their employers. I remember my fish and chip shop man down the way. He and his brother-in-law ran this fish and chip shop. And after a while, he discovered his brother-in-law was stealing from the till. And he was stealing from the till because he lost money at the casino. And so the family was broken up. The business almost went into bankruptcy. I mean, the impact it has to other people is just huge.
The interesting thing is when you tell a story like that, I reckon a lot of people would know a story. When it suddenly sparked a memory for me. I remember a bloke I knew when I was younger named David. Lovely bloke, an accountant, really nice bloke. Suddenly it was discovered he was embezzling from his employer because he was a compulsive gambler.
Yeah.
Gambling on horses. David ended up going to prison. He did jail. He was engaged to a nice young woman. I mean, it was incredibly destructive.
Yeah, our paper shop man, same thing. The paper shop there was there one day. Next day, it was all boarded up, closed up. The children taken out of school. The man owed a lot of money through gambling. And of course, it was a underworld kind of community he owed the money to. He was in fear of his life, and he took his family overnight, disappeared, leaving grandparents bereft, it was dreadful. But gambling creates huge problems for people.
A colleague of mine came to work looking very battered and bruised one day. I said, what happened? He said, I fell over. And then one of his friends said to me, no, he owes money to the wrong people because he gambles with the wrong people.
Yeah.
Let me read a letter. This is a letter written by the wife of a gambler. And this paints the picture very vividly of what it is gambling does to a family. She writes, over 10 years of torment, fear and pain, I lost my home, life savings, and finally, my husband. The consequences of his gambling addiction became so overwhelming, my husband took his own life. I have lived everyone's worst nightmare and tragedy, yet there's no national appeal or heartrending appeal for victims of gambling. let alone for victims left after suicide because of gambling. A socially unacceptable tragedy brought about by a socially acceptable, constantly encouraged addiction. In addition, government tax on gaming machines serves only to strengthen society's addiction to and support of another parasitic industry of human destruction. Next time you participate, she says, in any subsidised activity paid for by the gambling industry, spare a thought for those of us who have paid for it with our blood, hardship, heartache and grief. Now that's a Sydney woman, and she's been through it all, and she's not alone, is she?
No, she's not alone. And very beautiful letter, really. Parasitic industry. It is
Yes.
parasitic. It contributes nothing.
Yeah, but it takes all
But
the
it
time.
takes. In fact, if you go to the casino, there are no games of chance.
If you own the casino, you're not taking any chance, any risk at all.
None at all. You just take a percentage all the time. And it's just like harvesting money from people.
Now, because you're talking about 20% of the heavy gamblers and 80% gamble occasionally, and there are 20% of us who never gamble, we don't understand what the problem is.
No.
I couldn't see what I was buying for my money. So what are people buying? Why are they doing it? What's the appeal?
Well, it is a fun thing. That is, people put money in machines knowing they're not going to get their money back. Well, most of them think they do, but then, you know, a rational person can still, because you can say, look, I'll put $20 through the machine, I'll get an hour's fun.
Right.
So I'm just paying $20 for an hour's fun.
An hour of anticipation that something might happen.
Yeah, it might happen. And,
Yeah.
you know, I'm standing there and the wheels are turning and the button's being pressed and I'm chatting to people. And
And having a drink and all that stuff.
And it
yes.
cost me $20. And
Yeah.
that's, you know, $20 of fun. It's fun because it can get adrenaline spurt. You know, it's exciting. I can never say how the machine's all that exciting, but, you know, watching the horse race, watching the football game, whatever it is.
Yes, you get very involved in the horse race.
and
You're the
then
person who screams.
You get involved and you participate.
Right, okay.
Right? And so it's kind of vicarious enjoyment. And I am more committed to the game and to the side because I'm in there as well. It's
Right.
not just that I grew up in that suburb, that's why I support, you know, the Roosters, but some of my money's on the Roosters, and
Yes,
so I'm
yes.
now, so it involves me and engages me more. There's also the hope, the wish, you know, the old lady that I used to know who always bought a lottery ticket every week, and she spent many, many hours spending it in her head, you know, as to what she would do. She always, what will I do when I win
It
the
enriches
lottery?
the imagination, I
And
suppose.
it
isn't it?
enriches the imagination of you know, what can be done. It's also because people want money, and because, and here's the bigger issue, because we're materialists.
Right.
We actually think money matters, power matters. We think money will make us happy. We think winning it will make us happy. And so it triggers off in us this sense of, if I owned that, then I'd be happy. We can speak at two levels. One is personally and the other socially. You see. Personally, I want the money because of that kind of involvement and excitement and that kind of thing. Socially, the community wants gambling because people are going to gamble anyway and we can't be bothered prosecuting them.
We might as well control it and take a percentage.
And take a percentage. Because it's a cheap way of raising funds at the local school to have a chook raffle, right? And so there's a whole range of things we won't teach children at school because it'll do them damage, but we always are running raffles at schools.
So they sort of learn
So
how
it
to-
becomes part of the
Yeah.
environment we're in. Because governments make money out of it. Because once you start legalising it, as we now have, and promoting it, as we now do, there are a lot of wages. 20 or so thousand people work at the casino. You
More
close the
and
casino
more and more
tomorrow,
gambling, yeah.
20,000 people out of work.
Yeah, and you end up funding your health system on
And so your health
lotteries.
system is on lotteries. You've got, you know, 15% of your taxes are, I mean, if we closed up casinos, then taxes would rise, people would be unemployed, and the whole sense of economy, so socially we think, will be affected.
We've actually
Because,
seen gambling
you know,
increase in our lifetime, haven't we?
Oh,
There is
massive.
no, yeah.
Massive. When it was illegal, and yet was done, but the size of it was much, much smaller. Now, we can't be sure because how can you test the statistics of it? But it really was, because the large percentage of the population did not put money on because people didn't want to go to SP bookies because but
It was
now-
a grubby thing to do.
It was a grubby thing. Now it's widely available. It's a glamorised thing to do. It is everywhere in our community and growing.
You'll like this. It is so widespread now you can bet on anything. Ladbrokes, the British bookmakers, are now making book. They're putting odds on what colour hat the Queen will wear to Ascot. You can get 5 to 1 on blue, you can get 9 to 1 on pink, and you can get 100 to 1 on tartan. So you can bet on anything. I mean, this is gambling gone mad in a society.
I wonder if some of the royal family are on. Watching.
No idea.
Yes, I mean, look how it's distorted something like cricket and
Yes.
international cricket and
Yes.
the career of that poor man Hansi Cronje.
Yeah. Who fell into that trap.
Fell into the trap and terrible shenanigans about giving advice on weather conditions and pitch conditions to Pakistani. I mean,
But they just happened to be bookmakers they were giving the advice to.
it is destructive at so many elements of our society, but it keeps the wheels of economy going. So the economic rationalist thinks the more that businesses are doing business, irrespective of the fact that it's gambling, it's an irrelevant. More trade just increases business, increases the economy.
Right.
So here's something that lots of people will spend money on, so it will create jobs, that then puts more money back into the system and so on.
Yep.
Now, the Industry Commission report showed that that's not actually true.
So it's not good for the economy.
It's not good for the economy because not only would that money be spent on other things that are more useful if we weren't spending it on that, but furthermore, the indirect costs of the economy outweigh whatever benefits you might get to it. And so, I mean, this is a report by economic rationalists. It's not a report by the socialists or the wowsers.
Yes.
And yet they can see that that actually is not true. And then it's kind of made, sanitised, made good by clubs that are involved spending some money doing, putting on junior rugby league clubs or sponsoring football or sponsoring...
Outings for kids with cancer or whatever.
Yeah, but if we tax people honestly and fairly and evenly across the board, we could pay for all those things, and they only give a small percentage, tiny percentage of the billions of dollars that they're getting. It's billions and billions of dollars. It's not being put back into the community. What's being put back into the community is just enough PR to make it look acceptable.
If the problem is that big, we'll get to the personal problem in a moment, but if the social problem is that big, is there anything we can do about it socially? Is there any point in ever protesting or even in little ways by saying on Melbourne Cup Day I won't take part in the sweep? I mean, we're Christians, we're individuals, we want to do something, and there's this social problem. Is there anything we can do or is it just beyond us?
Well, on the individuals in Melbourne Cup Day, we'll get to the personal in a minute and I'll tell you personally how I handle Melbourne Cup Day if you want to know. But socially, I think we need to denounce the government. I think it's one of those things that the federal government has more power over than the state governments because the state governments are all in bed with the hotel industry, with the gambling industry, and they are too dependent upon it. It's federal government and sometime, somewhere previously, they had wound gambling out of our society. Now, I know it comes at a cost because you then wind up with a vice squad looking for gambling and so on. But without going into prohibition, we certainly can push it further back. We certainly shouldn't have any mercy on taxing seriously the gambling so that it really is not a very profitable business for anybody to be in, rather than just taking a little bit of cream off the top, so that it becomes an expensive thing. It's like cigarettes. You raise the price of cigarettes so high that people can't buy the same quantity.
Yep.
So there are some social things that can
So it's worth
control
campaigning.
things.
It's
It is worth doing.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's come to the personal.
But you won't stamp it out. Prohibition's not going to work.
But a little bit of pressure, a little bit of persuasion,
But
not a
certainly,
bad idea.
and certainly against any form of advertising, certainly taking it out of all schools and things like that, certainly giving out the public impression that gambling actually is an antisocial activity.
Yep.
That would be helpful.
Well, let's come back to the biblical view of money, because is gambling fundamentally wrong in the way the Bible views the assets of this world? We are not meant to get something for nothing. We are meant to work in this world. What's the Bible saying that's helpful here?
What's wrong with gambling? at heart, it's not just the bad consequences. That's the utilitarian argument. At heart, it's covetousness. You know, the 10th commandment says, you shall not covet.
Yes.
You can't gamble without coveting.
Yes. I want to win the prize.
Now, most people don't know what the word covet means.
Right. So it's
So
an opportunity to explain something.
It's a good, covet's a good word, you see. I'm for that commandment. Haven't got the faintest clue what it means, but if it's one of the 10, it must be right. You see, covetousness is materialism. It's the desire to possess. It's the desire to own and for self. And especially the desire to own yours.
Yes.
So I like your coat. I really wish I could have a coat like your coat.
And I'll bet you will spin the coin and I'll win your coat.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. Now, you can't gamble and love at the same time, because I want to win your coat. And you can't gamble without being covetous, because I want your coat. And so why does our society love it? Because our society, having given up God, have become materialists. And materialists will always gamble, because materialists are always covetous. So even the smallest amount of gambling is always wrong, not because gambling per se is wrong. Like, taking risks is not wrong. I mean, do that every time I cross the road. What's wrong is materialism, covetousness. Now, how can you be in a sweepstake without covetousness?
Yep. The personal level, there's a serious personal aspect to this.
Yes.
But when the Melbourne Cup sweep comes around, I don't take part, neither does my wife. You've got a method. Okay.
One of my family traditions, and one of my brothers invented it, was they would give to the family the names of all the horses of the Melbourne Cup. Everyone got their share of the horses divvied out. And my brother went and bought a block of chocolate.
Yep.
And whoever's horse won
Yes.
had to open the chocolate and share it with the rest of the family.
That
So
works.
we were in the Melbourne Cup sweepstake, but actually
Everyone got something.
everyone got exactly the same amount.
Now let me take you to the serious problem.
Yeah.
Because when I was telling you the story of David before, David was a Christian. His fiancée was a Christian. There may be someone watching now who says, I actually know I've got a problem. No one else has found out yet because I've covered it up. There may be someone watching now who says, I'm living with someone who's a problem gambler.
Yeah.
So what do you do? How do you deal with it? Christian or not, how do you deal with it?
Well, firstly, we've got to go back as a Christian community to be denouncing it. Christians, in broad speak, have too far gone into materialism and therefore stopped speaking against gambling. We've also been bullied into stop speaking. I'm noticing the other day, no one ever says, I'm a wowser or I'm a prude. They always say, I'm not a prude, but, or I'm not a wowser, but.
Yes.
We're unwilling to say, I'm a wowser and I think.
Yes.
Where all these terms are used to bully us into being silent. This is an issue in which the wowsers of yesteryear are actually right. And the longer we let gambling go unchecked in our society, the more manifest it is that our forefathers had it right and we've got it basically, fundamentally, profoundly wrong.
Okay.
You can't help but feel that deep-seated corruption has entered into our political processes, that they change the law to allow gambling like they have.
First step, open our mouths, say it's wrong.
So that's wrong. Second step, if I'm in it, and there are many Christians who are in it, then I really need help. The addiction problem is like all the other addictions, and interestingly, like the other addictions, there's a Gamblers Anonymous. It's a 12-step program like Alcoholics Anonymous.
And there's a Gamblers Anonymous for their families?
Gamblers Anonymous for the family, and you need to get help. I think you'll need professional psychology help too. Interestingly, one of the things the tax on the casino has done is provide money for psychology counselling for problem gamblers. So at least take that money and use it for that purpose. But you will need help. It's not something that if once you're addicted to it, that just, I'm not going to do that anymore and stop. You need help. But I think we need to bring it out in the Fellowship of Christian Community. I think, see, it's always the devil's attempt to get us to cover and to hide. He likes darkness and he likes to keep it in secret. Whereas the scripture says, if we confess our sins, God is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness.
Those Christians who think it's okay to have a flutter occasionally, if they say, I've got to stop because it's wrong, and talk about it in the home prayer and Bible study groups, the one who's got the real problem is going to understand this really is important, this is serious.
That's right. And we mustn't do the flutter because You might be one of the 20% who only gamble once a year on the Melbourne Cup. But in your office with whom you're gambling will be one of the 20%.
Mm.
See, it's only 1 in 5. So you've got 5 in your office.
One of them's got a problem.
One of them is spending up to $12,000 a year, losing $12,000 a year on gambling on average.
You could look around your church, someone there is going to be having that problem.
So you can't afford to just ignore their needs unless you're an unloving materialist, which atheists are materialists. Their philosophy has no love.
And Jesus has said we can't be like that.
No, I must care for my brother in this regard, and it's awful what people are going through. And so we mustn't be condemnatory, we've got to be helpful.
Right.
You know, if we really bang the drum, it's a wicked sin to ever so much as have a raffle ticket.
Yep.
All you do is you put people into greater and greater quietness about
But you say,
their big
I
problem.
won't ever do that because it's wrong and it's
Yes.
really important we don't do it.
Yeah, it's very important we don't do it. It's very important we help those who have got themselves into trouble through it.
If someone ever said to me in my Bible study group, look, I've got this problem, what do I do? Then what I need to do is help them find Gamblers Anonymous.
That's the
Get
first
in
place to
touch
go
with
to,
them. Yep.
yes. And then to go to the pastor and talk with them, with the pastor, take them with you, talk to the pastor, and try and find the kind of psychology and counselling systems that are very freely available because of the taxation from the gambling industry.
Philip Jensen, thank you for that.
Thank you, Cal.
We do need to be concerned. We need to be prepared to say something. We need to be prepared to pray for the people who've got the problems. And if you happen to be one of those people, then you've got to face it and admit it, and you've got to do something about it. And thank you for your company on this edition of The Chat Room. We'll return next time with another topic to chew over on